Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar from Asset Finance Connect, sponsored today by NetSol. Today, we're going to be looking at the practical application of AI in auto and equipment finance. We've got a fantastic panel today to discuss this topic. We'll be discussing it with real practitioners from the industry and technology providers from the industry. So I'm joined today by Dario Morelli, who is the Vice President for AI at NetSol, Tony Lynch, who is the CEO and founder of CarPass AI, and Andy Trimmer, who is the Head of Technology at Simply Asset Finance. I'll let them introduce themselves in a bit more detail in a moment, but just to give you an overview of what we're going to be discussing today, we're going to be talking around AI readiness, what that means for organizations, what kind of aspects you need to focus on to be ready to deploy AI and actually see benefits within your business. We'll be talking about how to understand the right use cases and how to align that technology with your business objectives and your business maturity with AI. And we'll also be understanding how to balance AI autonomy with human oversight. And this is actually my first webinar in my new role as the AFC Special Advisor on AI. We're going to be making a real effort at Asset Finance Connect to bring real practical content to the industry on the application of AI, the implications, and we'll be trying to have more events like this where we're talking to real practitioners, and we'll also have a lot of content along these lines at next week's Asset Finance Connect UK conference. So with that, I will ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So perhaps Dario, if you could introduce yourselves and explain a little bit about your focus on AI.
Sure. So my name is Dario Morelli. Thank you for having me. I am the VP of AI for NetSol Technologies. I joined the company about 2 months ago with the aim to head up a team of AI specialists that work across 3 main functions. So improvements on our product, making our product AI ready, and internal efficiency across the company, as well as AI supplied to some of our customers in the professional services space. Very briefly, I was previously at Admiral Insurance in a similar role for their international markets. Prior to that, I was at TrueLayer, which is the leading open banking network in the UK and Europe in a data and analytics space as well. Prior to that, I was in the music industry in similar analytical roles for more than a decade. That's me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great experience there. Tony, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tony Lynch. I was the founder of a company called Faxi, which was a corporate carpooling platform, which was bought by Toyota Finance and Toyota Insurance Management in 2019. Since then, I've been the entrepreneur in residence, reporting to the Toyota Finance board. And 2 years ago, working with Toyota Finance, we created CarPass as an innovation startup to understand finance first and how AI could be used as a customer-facing tool.
Thank you very much, Tony. And we'll dive into that a little bit more as we go through this. So, and finally, Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Trimmer. I'm the Head of Technology at Simply, working in asset finance here for the last 7 years. Prior to that, I was also working in the asset finance space and largely technology agnostic. So love all realms of technology and bringing that into my role. So here as a person that implements AI, but also sort of gets the weekly scaremongering around what it can be, what it could be. And I think once a week I get told, have I watched The Terminator, just in case. So here to provide an alternative view of how we're using it today.
Fantastic. And I think that practical insight from what you've been doing at Simply will be really helpful. So Rosanna, could we have the first of our poll questions today? So the first question we're going to ask today to our attendees is around your organization's level of AI readiness. So if you go ahead and vote in that, we'll leave that up for just about 30 seconds. And the reason, we want to set the scene here in terms of understanding where organizations in the industry feel they are in terms of readiness. and we're going to kind of walk through what we think and what the attendees think are the key aspects to readiness in your organization, the key elements that determine whether you are in a position to make the most of AI. So go ahead and select where you think your organization is in terms of your AI journey, how far you think you've progressed. So, Rosanna, how are we doing on the answers? Are we ready to have a look?
So I think we might want to leave this a little bit longer to give people a chance to vote, Richard, and then we'll come back to it if that's okay.
Absolutely. So Dario, let's start with you. So can you talk us through, from your perspective, what do you think are the key elements for an organization in order to be ready to make the most of AI?
So my experience comes from a mix of startup, scale up, and large enterprise world. So I've seen a fair amount of difference across different sizes of organizations and complexity. And I've narrowed it down to 3 key elements that I think more often than not tend to be true, regardless of company size and regardless of specific vertical or industries. And it's these 3 really. So the first one is business alignment of the AI initiative. The second one is data access and usability. And the third one is your talent strategy. And I'll briefly touch on each one of these. The first one is probably the most critical one, because particularly now, when we look at AI, it's very tempting, considering how easy and fast you can iterate on a POC, to just jump in and do it purely because the technology allows you to. I tend to use a framework that starts and overemphasizes the business understanding and the business alignment, precisely because that is one of the key differences that you find between POC initiatives and production-ready, enterprise-grade initiatives. The business understanding and the business alignment. I would argue that if you cannot answer questions such as, what business metric are we impacting? What is the ultimate goal of this initiative? What is the marginal revenue increase, cost reduction, efficiency improvement, risk mitigation that we're meeting with this initiative? If you cannot answer any of these questions in a way that is satisfactory, probably you have some issues. Secondly, data accessibility and data usage. Needless to say, AI does rely on data a lot more than it relies on different models. You might see, particularly in the generative space, you will have different benchmarks, and OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, they best each other every other week. So I would argue that any model now is becoming less and less differentiated. What is differentiated and extremely specific to your organization is the data that you have access to, and how well it is organized, how well it is governed, how accurate, how timely, all the good things that we learned with data management 101 are still and even more relevant than before. So data usage, data accessibility, data quality. And then thirdly, your talent strategy. You might know what problem you're solving and whether it is aligned to your business strategy, great. You might even have the data to be able to answer some of those questions with AI. But I've noticed that unless you break down talent strategy into hiring the best people you can, growing those people that you got through the door, and unfortunately, stepping up as a leader and having some of those conversations where perhaps some people are not really a good fit for that type of endeavor that you've asked them to undertake. If you don't do these 3 things as part of your talent strategy, there is going to be a huge disconnect and a huge hindrance into your ability to deliver. So I narrow it down to these 3: talent strategy, data access, and business alignment. And more often than not, they seem to be relevant and true for me.
Yeah, I completely, I think I would agree with that. And I think what we'll do, we'll come back to the data point, because that's really important. And we've actually had some pre-submitted questions on that topic. And likewise, we'll talk about the talent point in a second. But moving back to your first point around aligning it to the business objectives and strategies, I want to first hand this over to Andy, because obviously that's a key consideration for you. And I know I've spoken to you a little bit in the past about how you approach both where to focus your efforts and also how you're measuring the impact you're having when you're working on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth saying first and foremost, I wouldn't say that we've sort of stepped up to the business and say, right, it's now time that we're going to do an AI revolution. That's not sort of our position. And actually, when looking sort of at those 3 points, the model hasn't changed that simply. We're just learning to complement it. We know that there has to be a cost-benefit analysis in the same that we've always worked. We're looking at the risk of doing something versus the risk of not doing something. Where is time beneficial both to sort of simply team members, but also to the customer? Would they rather wait 7 seconds for something or 15 minutes? And that's where we're sort of seeing AI as a tooling, not necessarily as a project or as an entire solution. It's just another very, very quick, very, very efficient tool set that we can use behind the scenes. So we don't go out to the organization and say, hey, where can we implement AI? We say, where can we make your lives easier? Where can we absolutely increase the customer journey? And it might just happen that an AI component is part of that tool set and is part of the answer. So for us, that's really, really important that we haven't sort of come in and said we're going to change our business model to an AI first, anything like that. Yeah. We've just taken the same solution or the same way of working that we have always, which is here's a tool. What benefit can it deliver? What's the risk that it injects, and what risk does it remove? Data readiness, also in particular, I think a lot of people are put off about getting started because they're concerned about data readiness. And absolutely, if you're trying to build a large language model based on your own data, you might not have all of that in the place where you want it today. But what AI tools are really, really good at is taking unstructured data and putting it into a structure. So actually, there's tooling that you can bring in already that actually maybe looks at some of those unstructured interactions and starts getting your data set in a place where you could use it in the future as well. So, we're doing things like sentiment analysis from an email. We're doing things like categorization of requests that come in. We're using models that are within the tools that we're already using. Because they're there and they're proven, and actually, hundreds of thousands of emails and taking sort of the sentiment out of those and bringing that into our organization doesn't mean we have to go through the how many ever thousand emails that have come before us. So again, it's not about data readiness just within your organization, but within the tooling that you're using as well. Testing, reiterating, making sure that it's there, which also then changes this whole talent acquisition sort of proposition slightly, because whilst absolutely, if you're building your own models, then you need a very solid data team, I would say, to make sure they understand what's going on, the inputs, the outputs. But if you start using the tooling that's already available within your organization, some of them are a flick of a switch, then you just need that product ownership mindset that a lot of organizations actually already have. Specialize in a tool that you're using. How do new features come in, and how can they offer your business more, and how can you roll those out? Same with an AI tool. All of a sudden, you can import a picture coming into an email, and you can do some recognition off the back of that. Again, it's not using your own data set. It's just using tools to help yourself get an answer in seconds, not minutes. So I think that's where we've had a lot of success without sort of going into this full scale AI is everything. It's just one part of what we do.
That's numerous really interesting points there to pick up on. Going back to something you said towards the beginning there, in terms of your approach to AI. So, because there's often the risk of it, and Dario kind of hinted at this as well, being a hammer that's looking for nails, right? And you've taken a very different approach in this, in that you've just incorporated it into your existing toolbox alongside everything else and treated it as another tool that you've added in, and you've not really majorly changed your approach, which I think is really interesting. And I think as a lot of organizations are realizing that's perhaps the more productive way to view it. You kind of hinted there as well about understanding what's in your existing toolkit and the products that you're already using, which kind of leads us on to one of the audience questions that we've had around build versus buy. But before we get on to that, Tony, can you tell us from your perspective, so what is it, what has been the journey with CarPass in terms of determining where to apply AI and how, in a way that is delivering value in that chain between customers and dealers?
Yeah, so look, I have a completely different kind of view on the whole thing. My view on it is I'm looking at one particular part of AI. I'm looking at generative AI and large language modules. And one of the things that I can see is that when you use ChatGPT, or when you use DeepSeek, or when you use Anthropic or Claude or any of these large language modules, even though we've been doing this now for a year or 2 years, a day doesn't go past where I'm staggered by how clever the response is. So, I'm still, maybe I'm just a child at heart, but I'm using AI every day, and I constantly smile to myself and I think, wow, that's really clever. That's really smart. And most of the time it's much better than me. So if I write an email and I put it through ChatGPT first, every time it's better than my emails. Now that's a very low bar. But what I would say to the community is, what is AI good at? What is it working? So my view would be don't hesitate to launch AI. I would say if you follow what the car dealers are doing across the US and the UK, they've got a basic chatbot. And that basic chatbot may say, okay, well, this is our phone number, this is our address. But what the AI is incredible at is having a conversation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and an intelligent conversation. And what I would say to everyone is start that conversation. Because once you start, even if it's in a basic way, even if you just use AI as a basic sales agent that can have a conversation with your customers in any way, at least you get a sense of what those customers are asking for. And so my view is, no, don't wait. Don't worry about the data. The large language module is already amazing out of the box. You can create that. We're now in a process where we're creating a sales agent for a car dealer in half a day, just by scraping their website and adding their stock. And to me, that's still a very useful product. So my point of view is, find what AI is good at, and if you can launch it safely, launch it, because you'll learn, and you'll be like I am, where every day it does something and I'm staggered by how good it is. So that's where we're coming from. Launch it, make it safe, do something basic, but get it live, and then you can start looking back at your customer communications. One of the things we're seeing is, when you do launch it with customers, it gives you the ability to see what customers are asking for. And that's a huge step forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting insight in terms of, once you have that chatbot interaction, I've seen this with other things in the past, you are suddenly able to get all of that data on what people are asking and what they're looking for that you might not have so readily been able to get. One of the other things you picked up on there, Tony, is, you mentioned yourself, you are using this day in and day out in your life, whether it's for emails or other pieces of work, and that's giving you a strong feeling for what it's good at and what it's bad at. And I think, Andy, that's kind of what you were getting at earlier, right? In terms of, there's no better way really to get started with this than to just start using these things and seeing what they are good at and what they're bad at. Is that what you would kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean you have to unleash it on your customer base either. Ultimately, it's where you're willing to accept the risk. We've got some great people that interact with our customers all the time, and I don't necessarily want to take away from that, but I want to give them the time to do it, so that they're not searching through multiple systems trying to find information, so that they're not, trying to almost digest what the conversation is happening whilst getting the answers for those requests. So a lot of what we're doing is, as a request comes in, the categorization happens within the system. It gets either sent off to gather information, or it gets sent off to do something, and just informs the support agent here that what's actually going on, and the answers that they may or may not need, but brings it together, and it's getting better and better and better at doing that. So I think it doesn't mean that you're going to have to unleash it on your customer base on day one, but you can really start to look how it's helping you operate. I think DeepMind and Google, some of the first things that DeepMind actually did was just about changing how Google itself worked. It was fine-tuning how YouTube servers worked and making sure that people got the optimum streaming, ability. And I think later on, we've obviously seen now what Google are doing with AI, but it's very, very much that contain it, get comfortable, allow it to help you. And then if you're willing to make that risk later on, then take it.
And you're building up that expertise as you go, as you work through some of those things. And that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
So I think Rosanna, let's have a look at the poll results now, and we'll see what our audience, see what our panelists think in terms of the spread of answers from the poll.
So 50% for just beginning to explore AI possibilities, and the remainder is quite split over planning our first AI project, implementing our first AI initiative, and have one or more AI projects in production. Nobody has voted this time for fully AI integrated across key operations there, Richard.
And I think this is really interesting. Dario, what do you think? Is that what you would have expected? Oh, Dario, we can't. I'm not sure we can hear.
Is it coming through now?
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Particularly the 0% in AI integrated across key operations is so telling. And that tells you one thing that I think is a good segue from what Tony was saying. So what Tony was saying, at least to me, resonated a lot with the real tenets of Agile. So you want to create iterative value at every sprint, at every turn. So you don't start with this huge unmanageable problem, take 2 years and deliver, but you work your way through that and deliver incrementally. And so this data shows us exactly that, I think, because once you have a problem and you think that AI is a good solution for that, and you manage to put it in production, then all of a sudden you think, right, so what's the next step? And interoperability and integration is consistently one of the hardest things. And I'll give you an example. So even a NetSol or Admiral before that, there are companies that have been around for a long time. By definition, you will have multiple systems, multiple vendors that need to integrate in your broader ecosystem. And AI needs to also be part of that framework, of that network. And the integration part, I would say right now, is still not an unsolved problem, but certainly a challenging one. So you've just about managed to put something in production, and now you have to worry, how does this new AI, for example, this chat interface that speaks to the dealers, speaks to the auto captive, how does they integrate with the rest of the workflow? And I give an example that I think is very relevant for something that we do at NetSol. Imagine that you're working on an origination problem. So you're very, very top of the funnel in a classic leasing or financing scenario. And then you've solved that problem. But what comes next? Contracts. What comes next? Servicing. And different parts of the software will take different part of the problem and break it down further. Can AI automatically and seamlessly integrate with all of those? Most likely no, because a lot of those components might be built on different technological stacks. Some of those might be monoliths. Some of those might be microservices with different types of APIs, with different legacy code that is being used to build them on. And so I would say right now, a lot of the good things that are happening, particularly on the agentic side, is making those connections more standardized, more auditable from the outside, things like MCP. That's the fundamental problem that they solve. So they try to give models a standardized way of accessing external tooling, external information. And so for me, very, very telling that this is not something that it can be solved out of the box. And probably going back to Tony's point, some of the biggest hurdles you will meet exactly at that stage. So yes, you can get up and running very fast. Yes, you can get answers beautifully written natural sounding answers, but how does that answer then integrate with the rest of the workflow, with the rest of the technological stack? That is fundamentally an engineering problem and not so much an AI problem, which is also why you're seeing the term AI engineering coming to the fore a lot more.
Exactly that. And I think it's interesting because a couple of the pre-submitted questions we had asked around this question of integration with existing data, integration with existing systems, challenges around integrating with legacy systems. I think, you know, all of you have made points so far that kind of highlight the importance of how you integrate that AI capability. And as you've all said, you have the ability now to go and get these latest models that are extremely capable, and you can just start using them. And then it's a question of where you integrate it with your existing systems and your existing data. Andy, how has that journey been for you? Because, you know, and maybe we can also start to touch here on the build versus buy conversation as well, because you've presumably got a mixture of, you know, different systems that you're working with, and you've started to pull in different tools. Can you tell us a bit more about how that journey's been for you in terms of integration?
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky that operations only started 7 and a bit, nearly 8 years ago here. So actually, we were API first. Everything was already in the cloud, and actually, you know, we have quite a modular architecture, so everything can move as and when required. However, you know, I'd say that kind of set us up for part of this journey. Didn't define this journey. So we knew it was about data movement. We knew it was about sort of giving people the right things at the right time. So actually a lot of our structure is about not making people go into multiple systems to find the information that they need, because they have seconds to please, not hours. And you know, AI is just an elevation of that. It's another tooling that makes that possible. And if, you know, I think if people who run projects regularly, you'd look at it from a functional and non-functional requirement point of view. And I would say that this has just turbocharged both expectation and the ability to deliver on those non-functional requirements, because now people do have the expectation that it's not okay to go back to them in a week. It's okay for them to go back to them there and then and have the answers there and then, and for them to be exactly right there and then. So, you know, I think this is kind of where we've come through. I mean, we are sort of seeing things now where we are able to extract a whole bunch of information from a document that is sent to us. We're able to load that into the system in 7 seconds. That was previously a person spending 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how fast their fingers could go. And those types of scenarios come out of probably a bit of a dichotomy of parties within the deal structure, because we're working with intermediaries. They may or may not want to integrate through to us. They might just want to send an email. And from our side, obviously it works best if they integrate through to us, fantastic. But if they want to send the email, then we have to kind of pick up how do we process that with the same expectation on the other side. So I think that's where we've put a lot of sort of time and effort in. Same with, you know, issues going through the process, quality assurance. Actually, if you sort of inject AI into that part and continuously feed back to users, then we're seeing prompts on documentation for categorization. That's happening as part of the process rather than this sort of QA element that happens at the end, which has really allowed us to see people that these tools are helping. I'd say sort of the build versus buy, why not do both? It's easier to go with the buy, and actually, you know, I know there's a lot of people out there saying buy something new because that's going to give you more, but as I said before, look at what you've already got. Product roadmaps are continuously changing, and I think everybody jumped on a quick sender AI powered sort of feature within your platform pretty quickly. Certainly my inbox got spammed by them. So, you know, there's options here of use what you've already got. Absolutely. Maybe use it as an opportunity to upgrade to something new. Fantastic. And then actually work out what is important to you as a business and for your business model, for where you want to then build. We're looking at absolutely, I mean, with storybook lending, there's a whole bunch of words that comes with that, and with words there comes complexity, particularly when they're free form. So actually we can reduce some of that complexity and make it more structured in how we were already doing with a bunch of the integrated data sources that we were having. It was about insights, not data. Same with the storybook element of what we're doing here. For us, absolutely, that is an opportunity for us to build, to take the Simply voices, to take, we would say 8 years of experience within Simply, but within our organization, we've got a lot of experience and many years working in asset finance. Absolutely, let's take that and help maybe build something that's going to be beneficial back to the teams and help new generations learn things, and all of these types of opportunities. I don't think it has to be one or the other. And just slightly deviating back to the poll question, absolutely, just beginning to explore AI possibilities makes perfect sense. Everyone's dipping toes. Fantastic. I think it's kind of difficult when you say planning our first AI project or implementing our first AI initiative, because for me, they're not AI projects and they're not AI initiatives. They're just, business benefits, business projects that we're doing, and it just happens to be part of that journey is an AI component.
Yeah, that's a great point and a great way of looking at it. And I want to pick up on something you mentioned in there, an example where something that might have been 15 minutes of someone keying in a document might now be 7 seconds with what you've set up, which is extraordinary. And that kind of operational cost saving is potentially one of the big drivers. We're going to look at our next poll question, which is going to ask our audience about their view on the most compelling drivers. So, Rosanna, if we'll have a look at the second poll question. So, what is the most compelling motivation for implementing AI for you? And bearing in mind the very good point that Andy has made in terms of viewing this as something that fits in as part of your overall business technology strategy rather than needing to be this entirely separate thing. But if we're looking at what people are seeking to get out of their AI initiatives or their new business technology projects that are involving new AI tools, and whether that is, as Andy said, looking at your existing tooling and seeing what's been added, and we've seen lots of things being added to the Microsoft suite and AI note-taking in Teams and Zoom, which is tremendously useful, or whether that's actually engaging in starting to build things around your existing systems. What's the most compelling motivation in terms of business outcomes? And Tony, perhaps to kind of turn to you. So I know we've spoken about, and Andy just kind of mentioned there that there's an elevation that happens in expectations, right? So within Simply, Andy was talking about elevating the expectation of those operations staff in terms of how quickly and readily they should be able to do their tasks and quickly they should be able to respond to customers and brokers. Do you see this also in terms of customer expectations from their interactions with dealers?
Yeah, so I mean, you're already seeing it now that, lots of people are now using, if you look at my son and his friends, or most people, a lot of people you talk to, if you ask a question, they'll send you it back, oh, ChatGPT says this. And I think that's the elephant in the room that everyone's got to consider. I don't think the online experience going forward will be a conventional website. I think it will be a command line. It will be a chat line. I think one of the things that we're seeing, for the whole, to cut to the nub of this conversation, where should you implement AI? We'll implement it where it works. So, for instance, if you're a car dealer and you take any one of the large language modules and you add your stock as a knowledge base, ask it questions about your stock. And a lot of the time you'll see that as a customer, you get a much better search experience using a large language module connected to your stock than your website. And I think that this was brought home last week. There was a conference by the big aggregators, and the conversation around large language modules is the website filter dead? Is the search filter dead? Because with a large language module, that's unnecessary. And what I would say to all of you guys, if I can say one thing, the basic of AI and certainly large language modules, to get started is very, very easy. You know, to get a basic chat function working relevant to something that you do is very easy. There's no code. It's simply about importing a knowledge base. So if anyone wants to, any of you guys who are the 50% of just considering what your options are, just take any question your customer or your partners may ask, or any stock that you have, and simply create an OpenAI account or an Anthropic account and start talking to it, and then add a knowledge base. It could be a PDF, it could be a CSV, it could be a text file, and see how good the conversation you can have with that large language module about your business. I think it's quite amazing. There was a question from is it Stuart Jack or Jack Stewart? Has AI been deployed in asset finance sector to match customers with available assets? That's a brilliant question, because every day we're taking a dealer's stock, we're screen scraping their website, and then we're matching it with a database of their stock. And I think out of the box, for some customers, that's a better search product, especially when you add voice to it. So there's amazing voice now. There's amazing capacity with the large language module. It's super easy to add a database to it. So to get to that, whether that product is going to be launch ready for some of your organizations, probably not, but certainly it gives you an example of the possible. Does that answer the question? I'm trying to be a bit more positive and a bit more, get something done kind of response. And you can do it. And if you can't do it, we can do it for you. You can contact us and say, we're saying to car dealers, tell us your name, tell us your email address, and we'll give you an AI agent to play with. And in 10 minutes, they've got something to play with. And then they can see themselves if they think that adds value. And I would encourage everyone to do the same thing.
And the experimentation angle is key. Andy, did you want to add something there?
Yeah. So, there's obviously various legalities that are involved when you sort of scrape other people's websites. Absolutely. But I think there is an element to how can you obtain that information? How can you process it quickly? Absolutely. It's already there. And as Tony said, it's a great great user case for sort of saying, here's an opportunity. We're more than just money. We can help you sort of find assets as well. And actually, as part of our business model, we do that. We go out and we speak to individuals and say, tell us about your stock, and absolutely we might be able to find a new home for it. Fantastic. That's an elevation of the relationship that we have with our customers and with our partners. Fantastic. To Tony's other point around the knowledge base piece, if you don't if it's scary for you to go and do that, some tooling actually already has this part in it. So a lot of service desk software obviously has the ability to now add knowledge bases, a bit more structure about how you add the information maybe, but it's essentially giving you that. You can sort of load up various large language models within it. It uses the knowledge base that your teams are used to, or maybe have already written or used to sort of writing and accessing. And that takes the place of those PDFs and those CSVs and that sort of those other data sources, which is fantastic. It's ways that people are used to working, and then just adding that other element on top, which, again, can happen today.
And would you say, like, one of the key benefits, I think, from both the example you've just given in terms of accessing that documentation internally and from Tony's example, is perhaps the speed and ease of access to that information. It's just reducing the barriers for people to find and surface that information.
Absolutely. And Tony's exactly right, because people want to ask a question. They don't want to go into subsection 1, into subsection 2. Oh, someone's called this process, a KYC process and not a something else process. Okay, let me come out of that one back into this one and start to sort of break down where I've got my standard operating procedures, where I've got, information around how we work on a daily basis, how we use systems. That's all stored within knowledge bases. So it takes away that, let's try and find our way through and navigate through, to let's ask a question and see what information is stored within the knowledge base, and sort of guides us in the right direction, if not just giving us the answer there and then.
Yeah.
I would give a slightly different example just to try and expand the spectrum of potential use cases. So in the examples provided now, you have a semi-static knowledge base. It could be a bunch of PDFs, a bunch of HTML files that effectively you parse, consume, and make available to a chat experience, but it's still fundamentally a chat. One of the things that we are considering that we think is very promising for the industry is what some people call trade cycle management, or some other people I've heard call active asset management. But in a nutshell, I think of it as a mix of networking technology together with traditional machine learning combined with AI. What do I mean by that? What is the business problem? Let's go back to the three questions we had before. What is the business here, the business problem? I am an OEM, I am an auto captive, and I have a bunch of assets of which I want to maximize the value. So in traditional machine learning, this would be called an optimization function. So I have a metric, the lifetime value of these assets, and I want to maximize that in a bunch of different ways. Okay, right now, you might have that asset go through one cycle. For example, you give it out for leasing once and then it goes to scrap. Or you might give it for leasing once and then it becomes a financing deal, and then it might become a subscription deal. And all of these different cycles have different business models associated to them, different failures, different risks that could happen. Now imagine you look at all of these as a network. The OEM is connected to the auto captive. The auto captive is connected to the loan applicant. The loan applicant can or cannot be a client. If it's a client, that client might have one asset or maybe multiple assets. And all of these nodes in this network and their relationship between them, what we will call the edges, evolve over time. When is AI the perfect tool for something like this? When it solves two types of problems: extreme complexity and extreme uncertainty. If I am an OEM and that complexity scales to hundreds of thousands of clients, millions of assets, perhaps on a global basis, there is no human that can keep that in the brain. There is no chat that is going to give you an answer there. That is a fundamental multi-technology problem that goes from graph technologies to traditional machine learning when it tries to estimate values such as residual values, to generative AI and particularly agentic AI, where some of the decision support, not so much knowledge that comes out from a chat, but the decision off the back of that chat can be evaluated in a human-in-a-loop approach. What that means is you could potentially automate away all of those decisions, but perhaps we're not just at the stage yet where reliability is high enough that that would be a good idea. A human-in-the-loop could say, a human-in-the-loop approach would say, given these variables and presented with this information at my disposal, I, the expert in company X, think that the best thing to do with this category of assets at this point in time is to turn them into a subscription model, or to sell them out, or to send them to scrap. But right now, I think the fundamental difference in paradigm is combining these different approaches that we know, so graph technologies, traditional machine learning, and generative/agentic AI, into something more powerful that can be industry transforming. So if I look at this in a spectrum of complexity, but also potentially gain, that's where we go into some of those use cases in those multiple categories that you had in terms of value, where here you really create the possibility of new revenue streams, new revenue opportunities. So that's something where we are trying to play, and it involves, however, a level of complexity, but potentially of gains that is orders of magnitude larger.
It does sound like that's on the, because one of the questions we had was around deciding where to start and the, what are the low risk, high impact starting points. What you've described there certainly sounds on the more advanced end of the spectrum. Certainly a very high value to be had there, it sounds like, but it's also on the very advanced end of that spectrum. We're just going to quickly have a look at the poll results before we go into our third poll. So, Rosanna, if we can have a quick look. Now, I will admit, and I should have said this up front, this question probably irked people because it's not just one of these, right? Most people are going to view the answer as being multiple of these, if not all of them. But I specifically kind of wanted to at least lean into what people think is the most compelling of these. But it would have been nice, actually, perhaps we should have tried to see if we could have done this in ranking order or something along those lines. But it's really, okay, so those results are looking really interesting there. So the improving customer experience has come out on top. And I think, that's to Tony's point, kind of, and Andy as well, actually, right? You've talked about the speed to serve, right? Like your teams internally, the advantages they're getting in the speed in terms of what they're doing internally is turning around into those benefits for customers and for brokers as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of almost improving customer experience / meeting customer expectations. Because as expectations go up, if you fail to deliver on those, then actually the customer experience, whilst maybe exactly the same as it was 6 months ago, to a customer, it is deteriorating because it's not keeping up with where their expectations are now.
So the bar is being raised, and we see this a lot as well, where things in the consumer world, people are getting used to AI in their day-to-day life. Things in the consumer world are raising the bar in terms of what it then looks like when you're coming to finance a car or equipment. Interesting that creating new revenue streams came last there, and I think that's probably not surprising because of the kinds of use cases people are thinking about. They're mostly thinking about reducing operational costs, improving customer experience, perhaps accelerating that decision making. But creating new revenue streams is, if you look at what Tony's been talking about in terms of the ability to serve 24/7 those customers, you're potentially dramatically increasing the overall pipeline for a dealership, for example. And Dario, I know you had some thoughts around, well, as you've just kind of outlined, there's opportunities there in that value stream for the full life of the asset. Were there any other areas that you've been looking at that are focused on more on new revenue than on operational cost savings?
I think you see it there in the ranking purely because it's so hard. So you always have this tension between the low-hanging fruit, which inevitably tends to be operational efficiency, as a lot of people call it. So internal operational efficiency, but also with customers. So trying to be smarter in the way you serve customers. And then creating new revenue streams, as I just described earlier, you could sense how complex something like that is, but also how transformative. And so you will need to balance the investment into something like this that is really shooting for the moon, shooting for the stars, for something that instead can give you immediate, tangible benefits. And instead, perhaps it's going to be easier to chew from day one, which again was some of the examples that Tony was referring to. So in terms of new revenue streams, we are looking at something around credit decisioning that is also fairly interesting. And so we know that typically our customer here, our actual main user more than customer, would be a credit decision analyst, would be an underwriter. They're experts at their job. They know exactly what they're doing. So what is the value that we can bring here? How can we monetize AI by augmenting the decisioning capability of an expert with additional insights and data point that for them would have been extremely hard to collate and turn into something usable to make the decision quickly and effectively. Going back to Andy's point, IDP, so intelligent document processing now, I wouldn't say it's a 100% solved problem, but nearly. So we can very effectively take entities, information out of documents and package them in a way that create a frictionless experience for a credit analyst, a decision underwriter, that then can make, again, with a human in the loop approach, a much more informed decision with AI enhancements than they would be able to if they were to do the job as they have until now in a standard way. And again, here, however, I would say it's something that we can monetize, but it also creates an efficiency in terms of timing. That's absolutely clear as well.
So it's driving the top line.
Guys, one thing I would say about creating new revenue streams, from our experience, the large language module is very good at having a conversation. But one of the things it's brilliant at is asking questions. So when you think about creating new revenue streams, if I go back 20 or 30 years and we were all taught solution selling was all about asking the customer their implicit needs and that kind of thing. One of the things that occurs to us is the genius of a large language module when engaged with your customers is its ability to say, so for example, your future car buying experience on a dealer website, at the moment you're messing around with lots of different filters and lines, and can I have a Vauxhall, can I have a Peugeot? That's going to go. You're going to say, can I have a blue car that's great for dogs that's electric? And straight away, within seconds, it will come back and it will find the best blue car at a certain price. And then it will say, well, how are you going to pay for it? And this is the genius of, this is what I would encourage everyone to get on board with, is once you've asked the website a question at the moment, the website comes back with a flat answer. With AI, once you ask a question, it's going to give you an answer, and then it's going to ask you another question. Okay, here's a blue convertible BMW. How are you going to finance it? Are you going to finance it? Have you got insurance? Do you need extended warranty for that? What is the range? Do you want me to compare this against cars from another manufacturer? This is what AI will do today out of the box. So, and I know maybe that isn't relevant for this particular community, maybe the asset finance community, but any of you who are selling your products via dealers, it's going to be important, because very, very quickly, the customer's dealing with a dealer website, they're going to ask for a car, and then the dealer website is going to ask them back, well, what finance, are you considering finance? And if it says yes, whose finance product is it going to offer? So one thing I'd put in everyone's mind, what staggers me every day is not just the ability to have a conversation, but the ability to ask questions, which is fundamental to all selling skills. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's
completely. Let me just close with the 30 seconds to complement what Tony just said. This is a completely viable use case. We have a product exactly like that for digital retail in the US with Mini. It's live now. It's in production, and it works exactly as you described. So we're not talking about sci-fi here. It is doable and done. So by all means, that's a great point.
Yeah, and those customer interaction, it opens up new opportunities in that customer interaction. So we'll move on.
The other thing there,
sorry, Andy, go ahead.
I was going to say, sorry. I think sometimes sort of the wording in itself, creating new revenue streams, almost sort of leads people's minds down a certain route, and kind of to go into what Tony said there about, that gathering information, the asking the questions back. I mean, fundamentally, we're in the business of risk and reward as our business models. It costs us a certain amount as a risk, and we're trying to get to a reward. I think what it does do very, very quickly and very, very easily is reduce the barrier to entry. So we may not have gone down particular revenue streams in the past because it cost too much for us to run that line, for us to send enough people to ask those questions and digest the answers and feed that into how we're currently working and all of those pieces. So I think there's sort of an additional layer there that says it's not just about going, let me just imagine a revenue stream where someone sits there, thinks of an asset, it appears in front of them, and magically, it's worked out the monthly rental and done all the rest of it. I'm saying that actually you may have been looking down a particular avenue previously, i.e. what you would consider a new revenue stream. You've said we can't go there because we're not going to sort of make back what we spend trying to deliver it in the first place. Well, actually, there's a whole bunch of new technology now that changes sort of those scales. And all of a sudden, it's a lot cheaper to run. It's a lot cheaper to get off the floor. But it actually allows you to do maybe some of those things that you wanted to do previously, but haven't been able to.
That's a really interesting point. And I suspect that may be something we see coming through in the next year or two, as businesses like Simply and others start to explore what's now more feasible and cost effective to do within their businesses. So in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the final poll question. And the final poll question, so we're going to be looking in this last part about the risks and impacts of implementing AI in your business. So the question here is, who should hold ultimate responsibility for AI systems and their actions or impacts? And again, this is really another one of those questions where you could easily argue, that it would go across multiple of these, but we're sort of perhaps looking here for where you would say the buck stops if there are major AI risks in things that you're deploying. And it's really a question to start a conversation. But what I'll do is I'll loop back to something Dario said, and we've also had one of the questions in the chat has picked up on this as well. So Dario, you talked about AI systems or using AI and how you're focusing in that credit underwriting example, focusing on it as augmenting the human role, because there is that, the importance of that human expertise. And so your focus there. And I think this is, one of the things we wanted to pick up on in general is what is that balancing between the autonomy of what you might set up an AI system to do and that human role. So Dario, how do you see that balance?
I think this is so critical. We don't hear about it enough. You might read an article on agentic AI, autonomous agents. And what tends to get lost is that if the agent is really autonomous, fully autonomous, it must mean that necessarily some decisions that the humans used to take, they're no longer going to. And so what that means is that if a business really wants to be AI-driven, really wants to deploy autonomous agents, that trade-off is going to be there, and somebody's going to feel it at some point. And so I would argue that given the current issues we're having still with current LLMs and reliability, the human-in-the-loop approach is a suitable middle ground where you retain sufficient expertise, sufficient control, sufficient oversight to make sure that the outcomes that you get from the systems are exactly what you want. There are further efficiencies, further opportunities that you could gain the more you automate. But that automation is going to come at the cost of you relinquishing some amount of controls on decisions that are part of your sphere of influence right now. And in order to get to the next level of efficiency, you have to really feel comfortable no longer being in charge of those decisions. And I think slowly but surely, we will be getting in that direction, particularly as reliability of more complex AI agents increases. So I think it's going there, but that crux of that issue, so being comfortable relinquishing some of the control, I think will be troubling for some businesses that are used to making all the decisions 100% themselves right now.
And it'll be one of those things, presumably, that businesses will make an evaluation as they work through each of those cases. I'm just conscious, as we're coming towards the end of the time, we thought one of the things that would be really interesting to do for the audience today would be to share an example from Tony and CarPass of that dealer AI agent chatbot that allows customers to interact with the dealer's stock through a chat interface. So I'm going to ask Rosanna to share that link, and you guys, everyone in the audience, will be able to take that away and have a play with that. And Rosanna, shall we also have a look at the results for this poll and see what people think in terms of where they think ultimate responsibility lies? So that's really interesting. I think that's probably where I would have expected this to land. A lot of people think it sits with executive leadership, which I think is great. We really do need to ensure, and I think, Dario, this is something, you made a point about earlier, that it's important for the business that the leadership is understanding what the opportunities are here and taking a real stake in this, and a dedicated AI governance committee or similar. So that's a trend we're also seeing quite a lot in terms of organizations setting up something akin to an AI steering group or AI governance committee, where you actually have cross-functional representation and they take responsibility. And so you might have people from the business, IT, legal, compliance, and they together, they also upskill themselves. So that's a really interesting trend that we're seeing, and kind of perhaps encouraging that a lot of people felt that's where that should lie. So to wrap up, Tony, so we've talked a little bit about the opportunities. Was there anything else that you think you would like to add regarding where you see this all going for that customer interaction?
No, I think looking at the polls and there's 50% of people here are considering their next AI move, I would say be brave. It's a whole new world. The whole technology implementation environment has changed. A lot of the stuff that you can, a lot of the stuff, technical term, a lot of the things you can do with AI now is no code. You know, adding, you know, using an LLM, adding a knowledge base, trying it, demoing it. It's anyone can do it. So I would encourage everyone, if you're interested in that aspect of AI, then I would encourage you to get started. And we are running a workshop next week at the AI conference where we'll be showing how you can put a knowledge base to an LLM and run a demo. So if anyone wants to drop by, we're happy to share, you know, kind of like the work that we're doing and why we think it's good and fun.
Fantastic. And Andy, any final remarks?
Only sort of mirroring probably what's been said already. As long as you as an organization set the framework of what you expect, so that people don't sort of go too far out of those, then actually sky's the limit. And actually getting the people that are doing the doing involved in both technology and AI is always the best way to see good tangible benefits from it. So yes, absolutely, Mira, get started today, because otherwise you're just sort of losing the time that you'd have otherwise.
Fantastic. And Dario, any final thoughts?
I would build on this last poll, and I would say that the executive leadership should have a strong overlap with the AI governance committee. That's certainly how we're approaching it in NetSol. We call it AI Council. And so the most senior people across the organization, cross-functionally, need to be there, not just for ownership, but also for accountability, and really understanding the trade-offs, the risks and the opportunities that come with any large-scale AI deployment. So I see almost an overlap between those two answers, executive leadership and AI governance. I wish that they were, let's say, closer.
Yeah.
So Richard, can I add one more? Because I think it was going to be something that we sort of looked at, and kind of in relation to this as well. One of the views that we've kind of taken is within technology and AI, what happens when it goes wrong is often the best way to look at the risk of something. If it's just going to slow down your organization slightly, because actually a lot of the benefits it was coming was the sort of the risk, sort of the speed and sort of reducing the complexity side of things, then actually it becomes almost a BCP scenario. It's the same as if an integration goes down or if one of your systems is unavailable, that actually you can look at it and say, I know that we're not going to be able to process something in 7 seconds, but as long as my team still know how to do it in the 15 minutes, then it's not going to break us. It just means that we might not be running at the capacity that we could do. So I think a lot of people have fear of getting started in these things. And in the back of my mind, that's always kind of what I'm looking at is the out. If this goes wrong, then what can we do? Can the business still run? Can it still process? And unless you've taken AI as your entire business model, then absolutely it will be able to.
That's a great point. So we need to wrap up today. I would like to thank all of our panelists. Thank you, Dario. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, NetSol, for sponsoring today's webcast. We probably could have talked all afternoon. I know there's a lot more to discuss. I hope for you in the audience, we'll see many of you next week on Tuesday at the Asset Finance Connect UK conference. I know all of the panelists today will be looking forward to talking more on this topic at various workshops and sessions, and you'll catch us all there. And look forward to continuing this conversation next week and beyond. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks all.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.